Hi everyone, it's now week 4 of the 100 Days of Making Comics challenge, a challenge in which I work on my comic for 100 days straight for at least 30 minutes every single day. I'm still going strong, it now just sort of feels like part of the day at this point. I do get a little frustrated with the amount of time that it takes to render out the video, but there's no real getting around that. It's probably okay to just sort of have a mandated break in between things, but my computer still slows down a lot and I can't do a lot of the things I normally want to do while working, like listen to YouTube videos. But anyways, I figured that it would be a good topic today to just explain my process, just how these pages come into being. I've talked a little bit about why I'm doing this, about what my comic's about, and why I think other people should attempt a comic too. So it just sort of seems like the natural next video to be about explaining how I make my comic. For anyone who watches this series, I'm sure you can get a general idea of how the pages go from sketch to a final product, but in this video specifically, I'd like to be covering everything from initial idea all the way to the final page. I don't really think this can be considered a tutorial because, it's a creative process and I don't think there's like one single right way to get to a finished comic page, but I figured it would be fun to share how I do things and maybe that could help someone out. I'll have a couple of things to share on screen on top of the footage this time around as I explain my steps. I hope that's okay. It shouldn't cover the entire screen, you'll still be able to see that I did my 30 minutes each day, the time being in the bottom right corner. I'm not cheating, I promise. I also want to warn that I think my process might be a little rough around the edges. I do think there's probably still room for development and perfecting of my very sloppy technique. I don't do that much planning for my comics, and the day after I decided to make OCs and maybe make a comic with them, I was already well on my way to finishing my first 2 pages. And as a general approach, I'm not sure I'd recommend doing that. Most projects probably need a little bit more thought and planning. I had like 2 sketches of Ash and Nico done, and that was it. I'll show on screen specifically what I had completed before making the first pages, actually. I'm surprised it hasn't bitten me in the butt at all, but yeah, so word of caution there, I guess. But that's also kind of all I've ever really needed when it comes to anything, like commissions or even artwork for Kira. Once I have the general concept across, it gets approved and I just launch into it, and this time I approved the concept myself, so it almost needed less work than my regular stuff. I'm not huge on over-planning, I talked about it in my last video a lot, but yeah, I think at least a lot of the time it can be just a bit of a time sink more often than not. And I think there are ways around some of the stuff that people just sort of assume to be what you need before you start making a comic, like references. Maybe you've noticed that over the weeks I just bring up old episodes and I look at them if I need to see a character instead of actual references. Maybe I'll make things like character sheets one day, but they'll be for other people's sake, not really my own. After I came up with Ash and Nico, I realized pretty quickly that I needed more characters. So this is Meredith and the girls', I guess, concept art. It's even rougher than Ash and Nico's, but that's what I go off of, and that's about it. I think the Meredith that shows up, albeit it's only her back view, but I'm pretty sure that Meredith was drawn before I made this concept as well, so I think that kind of shows how I work, I guess. So for my actual page process, it goes like this. I initially had a bunch of ideas for single episodes at the very start, and I wrote them all down, just as many as I could think of. I now add to that list anytime I come up with an idea for an episode, and I remove an idea once it's made its way into an actual episode. I try and make the ideas pretty simple, something that I can explain or just get across in about 4 panels. Of course, anything bigger I need to then separate into a couple of different ideas, but I'm pretty rigid in my format. I don't really want to stray too far from that. After I've made that list of ideas, I decide the order, just sort of based on what makes sense or what I think I should show the reader first. My format's pretty flexible, the episodes don't need to be completely connected, and I can shuffle my ideas around until I find something that flows nicely. I try to break any patterns that form, especially in the beginning. I tried to be careful about things like not having multiple stories in the exact same setting all at once, or making sure I'm not sticking to the exact same cast of characters every single episode, even if Nico and Ash are the mains. Unless it's a continuous story, then of course I have to. I need to tell the story that I'm trying to tell, but right after that, the cast and location will have to be mixed up a little bit more. So after I've sorted out which episode idea I'm drawing next, I just write out a script for it. I'm not looking to get the exact words here, I just want the general flow down, and I want to make sure that I can fit this idea comfortably into 4 panels. If I need, I'm okay extending to 6, but if it reaches 8 panels, I then need to cut it into 2 separate episodes. On screen is the script that I had for episode 6, and you'll see that none of the dialogue matches what made its way into the final episode, but the general idea is there. It's really just the 4 beats that I need. Then when I've worked out what goes into the panels, I draw out the thumbnails and I get the placement down based on what I see in my head. This can be kinda messy. I like showing my sister my thumbnails and see if she has any idea on what's going on, and she never really does. Here's the thumbnail for page 6, and you can sort of see how it would turn into the pages, but I don't expect anyone but myself to be able to work from these. After that, it's pretty much everything that I share in these videos. I blow up the thumbnails so they're big enough to fit on the page, then I sketch over the top and draw out the final page to completion. I have a general placement for the word balloons included in the thumbnails composition, but I work them out properly during the initial sketch phase. My thumbnails aren't perfect, sometimes I have to change the size of elements to make sure everything works. I've been leaving this out of videos, but I type out the text around the time I'm ready to ink the page, then I make the balloons to match the size of the words that I typed. I feel like I need to see the characters' faces drawn and finished before I can make sure that the words fit perfectly with their expressions. I'll make adjustments to the text as needed, even right up until the very end of the page if I'm, still not happy. The text layer is then made invisible for the videos though, just as to not give everything away for future episodes. But as you can see here, for episode 6, the original script and what I ended up going with are completely different. And then that's it. I think my process is okay for myself, who's working on this project alone, but it would be a nightmare for anyone trying to work with me. I'd have to be a lot cleaner and decide on things a lot more concretely and earlier on in this process if I was not doing this alone. I'm not sure if this is very different from a more traditional page format or a more vertical webtoonsy scrolling comic. I don't think so. I've only had attempts with doing the more traditional page format, and I think things were pretty much the same. You kind of always need the ideas, a script, thumbnails, and then to draw out the page and maybe make balloons if there's dialogue. That doesn't really change from comic format to comic format, unless you're doing something far more experimental, of course. But yeah, that's everything. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I don't think this process is particularly unique, but I'm happy to answer anything if I didn't explain it well enough. I hope this was interesting, or maybe even useful to hear about. If anyone listening also makes comics, I'd be interested to know how different our processes are. I feel like mine's really sloppy, but it gets the job done, so that's fine. That's all I have for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you back next week with week 5 of the challenge.